Today on Cody in the Cinema, I'm discussing Criterion Collection films from Texas. Texas theme, Texas shot, Texas set, Texas this, Texas that, and I'm going to be talking about some other films that have to do with the state along the way. Because as you might guess, some of the films I like are at least imaginarily just set in Texas, such as The Searchers here. I was going back and looking at John Ford films that are supposed to be set in Texas. The Searchers pretends it's set in Texas, even though it's not. Actually shot there in Monument Valley, as you can imagine. If you have the 4K, by the way, of The Searchers, let me know. I want to see that. But I don't have a fancy Criterion copy of it right here of Blood Simple, which is the first one I'm talking about. This is a case of a blockbuster history of violence that at one point was, what, $13? History of Violence is in the Criterion Collection. It's a cool movie. It's not my favorite in the collection, but I love Viggo Mortensen, so I didn't need the case anymore. But what I have here is I have an old DVD of it with this creepy little kooky guy who's going to have a big deal, or going to be a big deal in the film. Now I think this was Frances McDormand's launch party, right? She ended up just being this tremendous actress, of course, Fargo, these Coen brother movies. This is one of them. If you haven't seen Blood Simple, it's a film that I rewatched it recently, and I felt about it almost exactly the same as I did 12 years ago, or whatever the last time I watched it. And that is to say this: Blood Simple, out of the Texas movies in the Criterion Collection. It is a great movie for about 2/3 and a pretty solid movie for the last third. I think I'd be interested to see how you all that have already watched the film, do you like the last third better than I do? I think it loses a little something there without spoiling. But, overall, this was an exceptional film for them, and it just has some really cool noir elements. So, if you've not heard of Blood Simple, 1984, Coen Brothers production, Joel directed it. This bar owner, it's a simple story. A bar owner, he has suspicions that his wife is having an affair with at least someone possibly working at the bar, and you kind of get a few guesses as to who that might be. There's a shady private eye, real shady. He's kind of like a demented Bob Hoskins in my mind. He's joking, playing around, almost like, okay, so Bob Hoskins, this is why I said that. Okay, bear with me. Who Framed Roger Rabbit? The cartoon film noir, awesome version, film, love that film, always have loved that film, Roger Rabbit. That Bob Hoskins character, if he was turned into a cartoon and then turned back real again, that's what I thought of this guy as being. Just this real oofish kind of man. Terrible man. Sort of funny, sort of creepy. Okay. He is investigating all of this stuff. And then, as he's investigating, he's offered a darker deal by a certain party. And so there's murder in this film. There's lots of, like I mentioned, lots of film noir elements kind of blended with some horror elements. If you read the Criterion Collection description, it talks about how there's a little bit of experimenting there. I mean, there is some of that. So this was made in the 80s. This feels a little bit like there's just this touch, this sprinkle of 70s slasher in here somewhere. Kind of always feels beneath the surface just a little bit, almost like even shades of John Carpenter. But the photography's excellent. You'll get these big, awesome shots of lots of light coming through two windows, and it feels symbolic and meaningful and all of that. Frances McDormand in the film as this woman who is allegedly committing this affair, you're not going to see quite the use of her that you would in something like Fargo, but I think it's enough of a starting point for her that you can tell this is going to be a real actress, right? This is going to be someone who goes on and has a stellar career. I love the dialogue. I love the way the characters speak so realistically. I mean, I've heard that that director and those Coen brothers, that they were really specific on the dialogue. I've heard that you had to say it in the exact correct way, by the script, and it does feel like everything is intentional. It's sleazy and gross, and there's this part in the film Also that I really liked, and this is an example of something the film does well. So if you've ever watched your Private Eye movies, you know that smoking, film noir smoking, okay, that's a big part of those films. In this film, the lighter, that the creepy guy that said was like a demented Bob Hoskins if he was a cartoon in the cartoon world of turned back around, if he was flipped back around from a cartoon and made it anyway. That guy, he has a lighter, and he opens up the lighter, and that, you get all the shots of the lighter. Anyway, the reason I mention that is the object, the lighter, becomes such a greater part of this film. It becomes not only a symbol, but a well-used plot device that never seems particularly contrived or annoying. To me, the use of light and flash photography, something there to watch out for. A couple of little interesting spins. I mean, there's nothing too marvelous about it. There's nothing that you haven't seen somewhere else, at least I don't think, mostly, but it's definitely a strong entry, and certainly will make you think, like, let's talk about Texas here, right? Like, that's a good time for that film. And I really liked it a lot. Sometimes these films in this collection, they do a really good job of both modernizing or bringing up to speed a film within, the context of the time period, but also giving a big thumbs up to the past. And this is one of those that just does that so effortlessly, The Last Picture Show, because if you know anything about Pete Bogdanovich, if you know anything about this guy, he did a really good documentary directed by John Ford. Really captured the sense of humor of that director. Love that documentary. Absolutely amazing. We'll recommend it for any fan of Westerns. But another thing he does in that film was he had a guy playing sort of an old storekeep named, what was his name? Ben Johnson from Shane. Okay? So he cast a guy from Shane. And Shane, the famous Western shot in front of the Grand Tetons, beautiful film with Alan Ladd. You probably heard of Shane even if you haven't seen it. Shane has a fight real early on in the film with this really arrogant, I don't know if you'd call him like a hitman, but a hired hand for someone in that film. And that was Ben Johnson as a young, sort of cocky guy, right? And here he is, this old man, sort of at the end of his life in this town that's becoming forgotten, much like The Last Picture Show. And that's very intentional, because in the Last Picture, not The Last Picture Show, the John Ford documentary, he talks with John Ford about, do you ever think about, this almost morose tone that the Westerns took as it went along. I think this is something of a goodbye from him to the Western genre, even though it's sort of stuck around. But you can imagine Last Picture Show by 1971, it was definitely not at the same strength, right? A lot of those Westerns have passed on. But I mentioned that to say this is one of the key films of the American 70s cinema renaissance, set in the early 50s. You can kind of see what I'm getting at, right? 50s Westerns. I mean, The Searchers back there, what's that, 1956? In the loneliest Texas nowheresville to ever dust up a movie screen. It's adapted from a Larry McMurtry novel, and it focuses on a few big-name cast members. Timothy Bottoms, this jock guy played by Jeff Bridges. Really like that character. Really love Jeff Bridges. Crazy Heart. Not the greatest film, but certainly a fun performance from him and his Oscar. And it also has this well-to-do girl played by Sybil Shepherd, who is trying to break out of her shell a little bit, both successfully and unsuccessfully. And the back of the Criterion says that they drift like tumbleweeds with black and white imagery, profoundly felt performances. The black and white's important to the film, much like it is in Raging Bull. It's a hushed depiction of crumbling American values, a pivotal work of a film historian and director, Pete Bogdanovich. There is a lot of like small town gossip. There's a small town affair. There's a fellow in here I believe there's a fellow with disabilities in the film as well, and it kind of just the idea that the motion picture could just be going away. It's like the whole hope of anything could be going away, right? Infrastructure, jobs, whatever it's not just about losing movies, right? That's an important idea, I think. We think about, and we have this conversation about things like AI, right? Well, if AI only replaces an actor, it's just replacing an actor, right? It's just a cost-cutting measure. No, it's not. First of all, it's not real, so it doesn't do anything. But on top of that, when we think about what art and film create, they create something that a community, a group of people, or even on an individual level, people can just really have a culture, right? A history there around film. And I think that's some of what the film pokes around at in different places. I mean, there's stuff about the army, there's stuff about this local business and stuff. I mean, it's a lot of issues that you would face, I think, with what the filmmaker, and as we said, Western historian wants to get at. I find it to be a really cool movie. I think it's a really pretty movie, if nothing else. I think there's also in here, if you open it up, you also get Texasville. And I was hoping that someone who had seen Texasville could tell me about it. Of course, you have Sybil Shepherd there on the cover. I don't know if there's anything in here about Texasville or not. Yep, Texasville Reconsidered. So there's a little blurb about that, a little essay. So I'll have to check out Texasville. If you're watching this and you were looking for me to talk about Texasville, let me know, because I want to see it. Oh, this cast, some other people I didn't mention here. I mentioned Ben Johnson, Sam the Lion, who I love him in this film. I actually think he probably won an award for this, or an Academy Award, or was nominated. Cloris Leachman's in this, in a pretty interesting role. Ellen Burstyn, who I'm almost sure, wasn't thinking of this when I started the video, was like the mom in The Exorcist, and a bunch of other roles as well. And it had a small performance, an early performance from Randy Quaid as well, if you're into that. So be aware of that as you watch the film. It's cool. There's a 4K of it. It looks great. It's something I really recommend. It's another one of those films I originally watched on DVD. I probably have the DVD sitting around somewhere, but I did pick this up one day whenever it came out in 4K. I mean, look at that little ticket on there. All right. Talked about The Searchers, allegedly set in Texas, even though shot Monument Valley. I camped there one time at a KOA. It was really, I mean, it wasn't in Monument Valley, but we were right outside of it. That's a really nice area. Really pretty, very easy to connect with the land. That's probably part of why I go on these road trips. I like to connect with nature and get disconnected from screens. Something I encourage you to do as a film fan, actually, because then whenever you revisit the screen, you can enjoy nature, which is a big topic here for our next recommendation. Okay, next recommendation, much like The Searchers, it's a beautiful movie. There's a lot that's been said about how this movie was filmed and how Terrence Malick took advantage of lighting and the right time of day. So folks that know about that, please tell me what you know about the film production of a film I have a tremendous respect for. I've only seen it once, and it's been a while, but it's called Days of Heaven, 1978. This is, some films in the collection, you just look at them, they're so pretty. And this is one of them. And I know that there was a 4K of it. I think I saw it streaming. So I didn't get, obviously, the very best look at it. Eventually, I do want to get a 4K, sit down to it again. It's a beautiful, gorgeous film. It doesn't sound like it would be, though. So it's 1916. Richard Gere is working in a steel factory or whatever. And he's not like the Richard Gere of Chicago. I always note... what's the character, the swindler in Chicago, that he's like this lawyer or whatever. He's not like that. That's always what I think of him as. But anyway, he's working. He kills a supervisor, so he goes on the run with his girlfriend, played by a really deceitful, just sort of almost malicious woman at times, Brooke Adams. But they pretend to be. They put on this whole ruse that they're related, and they work to harvest this in this wheat field, and it's just so pretty. And Sam Shepard is the farmer, and there's this like love triangle kind of thing, and he's kind of suspicious as to what they're doing. But it's set in the Panhandle of Texas, and I hadn't thought about that. I've been that way a few times. Like I've gone to Amarillo, but there's a really cool place in the Panhandle called Paladuro Canyon State Park. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful going to Paladuro Canyon. And there's a few other things up that way as well that I like to do nature-wise. But I was just thinking about going on the road trip, and how pretty that film was. And I wanted to mention it. Now, I haven't seen it in a long, long time. I remember the performances being great. I remember it being somewhat of a depressing film, and sort of a mystifying film, a film where you are very connected to the roots and the nature of the thing. So those of you that know it really well, tell me your thoughts on it, because it's been a while, but you should definitely be seeing it. And I know a lot of people were really, really excited when that got that 4K in the Criterion Collection. Now, I wanted to make a note here. Since we're talking about the Criterion Collection, and we're talking about Texas, one of the reasons I specifically made this video, since we're talking about Criterion in Texas, was because, of course, one of the areas I'll be is Austin, Texas. And Criterion fans, if you didn't know this, because I didn't, and I was streaming one day and someone told me this, the director of these fine films, the Before trilogy, Richard Linklater, he actually did a lot of work in Austin. He filmed there, and now I made myself a few notes here, because I'm hoping to get to see this, but in Austin, people, if you watch this, you can tell me, improve on what I'm saying here, but he is on the board, and I think he's like the chair or something of the Austin Film Society. And they support different projects. They have screenings. I wrote a few down that they have in that area. When I'm going, or around when I'm going, they were showing Kiki's Delivery Service, which is a great Studio Ghibli film. It's one of my favorites. Studio Ghibli movies are so beautiful. I've talked about them before. And The Big Sleep, film noir, right? These things work together. But I know he shot, so someone told me this on stream. Apparently he shot a lot of this movie, Slacker. I have this ready to watch. I have it ready to watch. I just haven't gotten to it. And maybe this is, yeah. A day in the life of Austin, Texas subculture populated by eccentric and overeducated young people. I've heard this is very indie. Folks who have seen it, let me know. I just haven't gotten to it yet. I may get to it before we go, but I doubt it. But this is something I wanted to mention because, I got this online a while back for kind of cheap. And I'm going to be by Austin. And I think in Austin there's like a video store that also sells physical media. But I can't think of the name of it offhand. But I'm so excited to go to Austin because of this. And I wanted to throw out here that if I'm going to be talking about Texas, and I'm going to be talking about Austin, Texas, I'm going to be talking about, that area, I got to talk about Richard Linklater and give you all the idea that if you have not seen the Before trilogy, you need to do that. I also have not seen Dazed and Confused. It's probably that, for all the films I have seen, that shocks me I haven't seen it. It's just one of those I would have thought I would have seen by now. I've only seen a scene or two of it. But this is a big deal director from that area. So anyone who was looking for this, that's my blurb for it. I am a little bit unfamiliar with this director on the whole, but my goodness, is Before Sunrise a great film. I don't know, what's your favorite? Do y'all have a favorite from the Before trilogy? I think my favorite's actually Before Sunset. If you've never heard of that, it's these two, Julie Delpy and Ethan Hawke. They meet on a chance encounter, and they have this long-term developing relationship. I'll leave it at that if you haven't ever heard of it. Okay, so we got to tell you about that, right? All right, folks, what was the first thing I thought of whenever I was putting this video together? Well, it's a movie I watched about a year ago, Red River, Texas. 127 minutes, 1948, Howard Hawks, Red River. One of the coolest looking cases in the collection. 48, Howard Hawks. So this was supposed to be set following the Civil War. And this rancher decides to leave a really dedicated, let me say obsessive cattle drive from Texas to Missouri. And during this time, he has sort of this adopted son. And it has a little bit of a There Will Be Blood feeling. Black and white, of course, obviously much older. The cast includes John Wayne, Montgomery Clift, and Walter Brennan, out of some you might automatically know. No matter what genre he worked in, this guy played by his own rules, this Howard Hawks guy. And the Criterion says that John Wayne found one of his greatest roles as an embittered, tyrannical Texas rancher whose tensions with his independent-minded adopted son, Montgomery Clift, reach epic proportions during a cattle drive to Missouri. Definitely about as Texas as it gets, because we're going to be through Fort Worth, and one of the things we're going to do there is we're going to watch the cattle drive, which is going to be fun. I've been wanting to do that. The first time I went through Fort Worth, we were like trying to get home, and we had to go a long distance back to Virginia, and nothing was open yet, and I missed the cattle drive by an hour. Very frustrating. So I've been wanting to do it since. But this is a really beautiful Red River packet. Those campfire scenes, man. There's something else in this film. The one thing about this film is it doesn't have the best ending. And it's sometimes talked about. Yep, I'm even reading about it here. And I'm reading about some other things I just mentioned. So, listen, Red River, it's not perfect. I don't like it quite as much as I like the John Ford Westerns, but I've only seen it once or twice. So maybe I will later. I wanted to put this on here as a special note. This is black and white. I think that colorized versions exist. That's awful. Just watch it in the original kind of version. And if you did if you're John Wayne, you only like a few of his films, like Liberty Valance or this film, The Searchers, or maybe there's only a few performances you like by him and you don't like all of his stuff, this might be a good one for you, I would think. While we're at it, some other things to throw at you before we get to our last pick. Because there's just so much film. Listen, there was something Giant. I started reading the novel. I know Giant is a huge movie from Texas, and that book and film are a big deal concerning that state. I have not seen the film with Liz Taylor and was it James Dean? I haven't seen Giant. So if you've seen Giant, you love Giant, or you know anything about Giant, you got to let me know, because I have not seen Giant. I want this film right here in the Criterion Collection. I have an awesome Walmart steelbook of it. Hell or High Water. Beautiful, awesome film. It is about a bank robbery, a series of bank robberies. A desperate father learns the bank is going to take his family's land. And his ex-con brother and himself, they start robbing banks. And an aging Texas Ranger in a riveting story tries to stop this or figure out what's going on. And so you get Jeff Bridges in sort of a neo-Western. Really like this film. It's part of a bigger trilogy. I think Sicario's in it. Really cool. But I wanted to mention it while we're talking about Texas. And I also wanted to mention something else that kind of fits that. Oh, it looks like my steelbook's got some damage there. Appropriate for that film. Another thing that if you're into some of these Criterions, you might like Rio Grande. I think this is a little bit underrated. This is a really gorgeous Eureka copy, which Eureka says is underrated. An underrated collaboration between John Ford, John Wayne, and it is considered to be the conclusion of Fort Apache and She Wore a Yellow Ribbon. And then it's a film he did with Maureen O'Hara, who I believe was it The Quiet Man? One set in Ireland, where he's Kirby York. He's going to protect settlers. And it's in wanted to say it was set in Texas, but I had set it aside. I haven't looked at this film in a long time, with this really cool cover. It's really great. And, oh yeah, one of the things I meant to mention here, we're going to go by the John Wayne Museum in Fort Worth. So I'm looking forward to that. I might take a few pictures of it, but you know, John Wayne was a controversial figure, but a lot of actors are. This looks like John Ford right here. Yeah, and then there's them. So this seems like something that one day can end up in the Criterion Collection. This is my Eureka copy, but I didn't really want to get to my last one without having shared that with you folks, because those are films I could see one day being in the collection. But of everything I've talked about, these films, besides maybe The Searchers, there's one film that I talk about anytime I can. What is the best Criterion film from Texas? I know I've not mentioned everything from Texas. I mean, a lot of people are partial to Lone Star, for example, and all these different films. But there's one film in this collection that to me is sort of the ideal modernish Western, or different take on the Western, or artsy, if you want to call it that, take on a Western. And this is one of the best films ever made, Paris, Texas. All right? If you're a Wim Wenders fan, it's his best, which is saying a lot. I mean, here's a guy who modeled or learned a lot from Yasujiro Ozu, who is my pick for the greatest director of all time. I've talked about that many times. You know, Perfect Days was a relatively recent release from him. Fantastic film. But this thing, I think, is going to live on and be his very best film. And part of that's because of the cast, led by Harry Dean Stanton, and his most compelling and sort of a weepy story from him. This German cinema pioneer brings his keen eye for landscape to the American Southwest and Paris, Texas, and some of it's shot in Big Bend. It's really cool. A character study written by, previously mentioned, Sam Shepard. It follows Travis, who they say his face is a landscape all its own. That's so true. He's kind of drifting around and he won't say anything, you know, and he gets discovered out there. He's been through all kinds of calamities and difficulties. He's dehydrated. He's looking for water and this and that. He passes out. And his brother ends up having to come get him, played by Dean Stockwell, and a great performance from him as well. And he takes him back to L.A. with the wife, and from there, you know, you start getting into where's his kid, what's happened to Travis's kid, you know, what's happened with a possible wife or girlfriend or whatever's happened in the past. And there's this scene, I talk about this so much. This is one of my favorite movies within a movie. There's this scene where they just sit around and watch home videos. And you've probably seen something similar. I mean, well, not exactly similar, but Martin Scorsese did it with Raging Bull and Joe Pesci and those guys. But there's this scene where they sit around and watch home movies. And I mean, like, it feels like you're sitting around watching home movies with a life that has gotten away from you. And there is a scene, no joke, there's a scene in this movie where there's like a mirror, or a two-way, you know, one-way mirror. You don't know, you can't see everything. You know, one character's here, one character's here, and they're talking on the phone and all that. And it's just one of those compelling moments. And this film from top to bottom is absolutely a masterpiece. So beautiful, so pretty. There's a scene where one of the characters gets drunk and this kid doesn't know why, and it's just like it. Well, actually, I wanted to talk about, especially why this was on my mind. Okay, from the booklet, where I'm going on a road trip. I'm hoping that this can be a culminating activity for my little video here. You can see this beautiful photography in this film. Absolutely great. But I almost forgot I wanted to say this here. This is from page 9. From On the Road Again by Nick Rodick. This essay, which you get in the packet. Bookmarked by my Phantom Tiger Magic card here. A lot of the action takes place on the road. Long a staple of American culture as much as in the novel as on the screen. And then down in the next paragraph, well, it also talks about the Jode family and the Grapes of Wrath, or the novel On the Road. But anyway, highways have been central to Wenders' films almost from the start. He christened his first production company Road Movies, and nearly all his films are about movement. Most of them are on the road to somewhere. Not all of them arrive, by which I mean that the characters' journeys are incomplete rather than that the films fail. And he mentions Kings of the Road here as you go on down. I like Kings of the Road. I don't like it as much as this movie, but that's a pack. I've seen a few of those movies that you can check out from that director. And there is, movement. It's a slow movie, right? Like, I talk about slow cinema a lot on my channel. It's when the movement is so important to the story and vice versa, the stillness. This is an important story. This is a guy whose life just struggles to come together. And the ending to this thing is so genuine and so almost like spiritual, And there's so much remorse and longing in this film. It works so well as a Western. It works as a drama, as a character study, whatever you want to call it. It's just a beautiful, just a lovely experience at the movies. I mean, even going through these stills again, I can't wait to watch this movie again. Just like Paris, Texas, and that joke is explained why it's called Paris, Texas. And the joke builds to... It's a great film, folks. I've talked about it before. I probably talk about it too much because... this is often in my top 10 or 20 favorite films, but you don't make a video about Criterion Collection films in Texas and not talk about the 1984 Paris, Texas. You just don't. All right. To wrap up here, if you haven't seen a John Ford Western, do that, okay? It's awesome. Awesome landscapes. Awesome. He talked to Steven Spielberg, and he told him, if you knew where to put a horizon line, you might make a good picture, but I've had a lot of these things on my mind. I'm looking forward to seeing the film culture in Austin. I don't know how much time I'll have there, but I'm hoping to see something neat. And by the time this video comes out, and if anyone sees the video to comment on it, let me know some ideas. That'd be great. But if you enjoyed the video today or you found any of this to be helpful, click that thumbs up for me. It helps us smaller channels to kind of grow, right? Which is important. And subscribe also. It's really important. Thanks for tuning in to Cody in the Cinema.